Hey everybody, and welcome back to The Intelligent Estate. Today we're diving into a topic that I know is going to generate a lot of opinions from both homeowners as well as industry people, and that's the idea that the smartest, most luxurious homes aren't the ones with the most tech, but the ones with the right tech. My guest today is James Ratcliffe of Homeplay in the United Kingdom. James has built a successful design-led business by focusing on simplicity, beauty, and best-in-class subsystems rather than one giant all-in-one control platform. So James, with that, it's great to have you here. Tell me a little bit about the approach that you guys have taken in your market. I think this is also wonderful for a lot of our US listeners to hear a kind of a different approach that may be taken across the pond. So tell us a little bit about the approach that you guys take when it comes to deploying a smart home.
Yeah, so this is a relatively new course for us. We've been doing control systems I've been doing Crestron systems for 20 years and Control 4 for 15 years or so. We were the very first Control 4 certified showroom in the UK. So I'm not a stranger to control systems, but in the last couple of years, we've done really well by designing systems that don't necessarily require a control system. So our approach is to have a conversation with the client, find out what's important to them, and then design a system that fits their needs. And quite often, that doesn't necessitate a control system.
What started you down that journey or that trend that you saw?
Um, I guess the thing where it really clicked for me was when my mother-in-law would come around to babysit, and she would continually struggle with making the TV work. We had when I renovated our house 10 or so years ago, we fitted centralized video and all the things that our industry is known for doing. And I thought it was pretty easy, right? I mean, you hit the watch button, you select what you want to watch, you hit it, and it works. But when our mother-in-law came round, she always really struggled with it. So then we took it out about a couple of years ago and replaced it with Sky Stream, which is our equivalent of DirecTV or whatever,
Comcast or DirecTV?
Comcast, that kind of thing in the UK, yeah. And we just put in a little streaming box behind the TV and used the Sky remote control, which is a brilliant little simple remote control. I've got one around here somewhere. And you can talk into it and tell it what you want to watch, and it's dead straightforward. And when we did that, my mother-in-law came around to babysit. And when we came back that evening, she practically ran to the front door, holding the Sky remote control, going, "James, I love this new remote control you've got. It's so easy to use." And I thought, wow, well, it was free. And the one that you didn't like was £1,000. And I just thought, you know what, there's something in this. Normal people just like simple stuff. And that was a bit of an awakening for me. And we've sort of expanded upon that within our business and the way that we design our systems. Now, as I say, like I do want to say, we do still use control systems, but it's not a gimme. Not everyone that comes into the showroom, we don't try and sell them centralized video distribution and what have you. That moment was like an aha moment. And I just thought, wow, we should really keep this in mind when we're designing systems. And when a client walks into the showroom, we're not automatically going to try and sell them centralized video distribution and all-in-one remote controls and everything else that goes with it. And then as we started having those conversations, particularly with designers as well. A lot of our work, most of our work, in fact, comes from recommendation from interior designers. And they really like it when they come to the showroom and we say to them, hey, we're not going to try and put touchscreens on your walls, because interior designers aren't a fan of that. They want to see a beautiful, solid brass, really tactile, sexy looking wall control, not a piece of glass, because we're all just so used to staring at glass these days. And I think the last thing you want to do when you come home from work is to have to navigate a touchscreen to turn your lights on, so.
You used the term simple when you talked about your approach with your mother-in-law. Simple means different things to different people. So when you're interviewing a client or meeting with a client and walking them through the experiences that they want to have in their home, how do you guide them to what simple is, and how do they show you what simple means to them?
Well, I mean, I've never had a client say that I want something complicated. Like, everyone wants simple, even if they're, really techie people. But I don't know, being able to walk up to it and figure it out without having someone explain it to you, not having to follow your guests to the toilet to tell them how to turn the lights on when they go to the bathroom, as you say there. Yeah, simplicity is, it just means it should be intuitive, and it also, it should be the systems that they're used to using and they want to use. So, if they want to use Spotify, we shouldn't be telling them that, well, actually this system works better if you use Tidal or whatever. That shouldn't be the way it works. So I think that's my definition of simplicity. That's not to say there shouldn't be some complexity in the background. There absolutely is, but the user interface definitely needs to be straightforward. Yeah.
You said you've been doing this approach for a couple of years now. What's been the response to it?
I mean, great. The only person who's not over the moon about it is the control system reps that come and see us and say, like, "Why aren't you selling as much as you used to?" I mean, overall, everything is better. I would say we've got the clients are happier. We get less support tickets. I mean, we can track this in Zendesk we use for our ticketing system, and it's just gone down. We just don't get the same calls we do, because everything is just a lot more straightforward. We have had, I'll be honest, we have had some pushback from some of our staff. A lot of the reasons they get into this industry is to play with the gadgets. Do you know what I mean? And I can think of one guy, one engineer in particular, who's sort of a bit miffed. It's like, oh, we only do Lutron now, and it's all a bit boring. But overwhelmingly, I think they can see that what the client is experiencing is better, and they appreciate that.
And it sounds like you've been able to track that with actual intelligent data of support tickets and the like. So you are taking less calls, which obviously means a higher level of customer satisfaction. If you're interviewing your clients post-install, what are they saying about the experiences compared to maybe they've had a home with a centralized control system in the past?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, we are still doing centralized control in that we still use Lutron systems. So I guess you could kind of call that centralized control, but it's not putting everything into like a single pane of glass. And yeah, they're all happy customers who are enjoying their systems. And I think no one ever came up to me, when we sold them a sort of £1,000 touchscreen all-in-one remote control. Very few clients ever said to me, "James, I love this remote control you sold me. It's fantastic." They generally had gripes with it because, their friend's got a Sky remote control or a Samsung remote control or an Apple TV remote control. They don't run out of charge. They don't have to wake up when you pick them up and connect to the Wi-Fi and all this sort of stuff. It is just a better user experience. I'm very aware, I've been doing this long enough to know there are limitations, and there are certain scenarios where a control system is necessary and it does suit certain applications. But we're still doing, we've got jobs on the go at the moment that are over £1 million in value, and they don't have a control system. They've just got beautiful lighting, shading, great audio, and intercom and all those other things, all the things that people want in their homes. Beautiful, elegant thermostats that are just really simple and tactile, that you don't need to operate via a touchscreen. It's just like a rotary knob. It feels right. You want to make it warmer, you turn it clockwise. You want to make it cooler, you turn it anti-clockwise. And that's great as far as I'm concerned.
You talk about a home with elegant lighting and the right audio. You're talking about experiences instead of products there. So if I came into your showroom to go through an experiential demo, tell me what you're going to walk me through and how am I going to experience the technology that I'm going to live in my home if I don't have a control system in place?
Yeah, so we start with lighting. We found over the years that it goes into every project we do has lighting. Our showroom, I did it 8 years ago. And when I did it, it started out because I wanted to do a cinema demo room. And then I thought, well, actually, we do media rooms and we do lighting control, so I should probably fit some beautiful lighting to kind of show off the lighting control, because lighting control without beautiful lighting is pointless. It's basically just a gadget. But if you've got layered lighting and you need something to pull it together, then a control system becomes a necessity. So the first thing we have to do is show them what beautiful lighting can do for an interior, and it really elevates. So you can have a great interior, fantastic finishes, beautifully thought through by the interior designer. But if it's not lit properly, then you're really missing a trick. So the first thing we do is show them what a huge difference a beautiful lighting scheme can make to an interior. And we just show them how easy it is to use as well. Because we do have clients that come to the showroom that say, yeah, I don't want a Lutron system. I had that in my last house and it was bloody awful and I couldn't use it. And when you start digging into why they feel that way, it's nearly always because the person that designed and installed the system just didn't think very hard about it and just sold them a bunch of keypads, didn't bother to get them engraved with to say what the buttons do. And so they might have had a 10-button keypad and all the buttons were, who knows what any of them did, and they're mashing away at buttons and the garage doors opening and closing and they can't just turn the lights on. So we show them that when it's thoughtfully done, and we always follow a similar kind of thing with our engravings throughout the whole house. We do 4 buttons: bright, soft, late, and off. And with those 4 buttons, anyone can walk up to the lights and make them do what they want.
So you're using a control system, and you mentioned Lutron. Are you using the Lutron native app then for control when people want the ability to control lights or whatever service it is from a phone? Or have the native apps just gotten so good that you don't need as much of a control layer on top of them because they all have their own control layer built in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, when you're controlling your lights, you very rarely ever use the app. You know, we've got a couple of clients that are into Siri and that sort of stuff, and they want to be able to say to their phone, hey, whatever, can you... But they're very, very few and far between. Most of our clients just want to push a button and have the lights do what they want easily. And but then if they want to edit a scene, so let's say, they want to make the light over the dining table a bit brighter on the soft scene or whatever, they can go into the app and they can edit that. And it's very easy to do. And and do you know what? Even if they had a control system, they would still need to go into the Lutron app to edit the scene anyway. Do you know what I mean? So, and the same goes with timers and that sort of thing. You know, if they want to set a timer to adjust their garden lighting to come on at different times, they would use the Lutron app for that. And honestly, I wouldn't say it's a great app, but it's perfectly good enough. And it's better than using a control system app because you can't get that deep down into it to do that stuff.
You mentioned that you have a client come in and they would say, oh, I don't want that system because I had it in my old house. And I think we've all heard that. And it doesn't matter what the brand of system is, right? It's not whether it's Crestron or Lutron or Savant or Control 4. It's that they had an overly complex, over-engineered system that didn't meet their needs. Why do you see that happen so often in this industry?
I think because I got into this industry because I love sound and speakers and music. And I think a lot of people get into this industry because they love gadgets. And then they end up designing systems for normal people. And I think that's a lot of it. I think, we're all engineering. We want to make electronics do cool things. And I think there's a lot of that. Empathy, being able to kind of like put yourself in the shoes of the client and imagine like, what do I actually want to do here? No, it isn't important that I can control the lights in my bathroom while I'm on the beach or whatever. That doesn't actually matter. One of these sort of myths of the control system that I continue to hear is that, you can have these kind of sort of scenes or automations where you come home from work and the lights come on, the heating sets to a certain temperature and music starts playing. Well, I don't want music to start playing every time I come home. Sometimes I do, but I'm quite happy just to go into the Spotify app and put some music on,
So you've taken the approach that instead of automating these welcome scenes, just make them really easy to access as opposed to creating these macros or whatever you want to call it that the quote unquote home automation system has traditionally done.
Yeah, and you can still do so. For instance, the two kind of leading the leading lighting control system and the leading home audio system. I don't think you get too many arguments from anyone who knows anything about this to say it's probably Lutron and Sonos. And they have a native integration. They talk to each other baked in. So if you do want a button that plays your favorite radio station or your favorite Spotify playlist from a button on a Lutron keypad, you can still have that. And but it's all, you don't need to have a programmer come out to make it all work. It's just sort of baked in, and the homeowner can edit things themselves. So if they decide they want a different playlist or a different radio station, they can do it without having to call us up, which they love. You know, they like being in control. I don't think anyone wants to be beholden to a nerd to come and make what seem like fairly simple changes in their home.
How much of this has been enabled by the shrinking of technology? So you mentioned your Sky set-top box that, that used to be a big, massive box that you had to find a spot for, and now it's a small little box that goes behind a TV. Or you mentioned a Sonos unit, which is a tiny little device that can be really hidden anywhere. How much of this has been enabled by the miniaturization of the equipment that's out there?
Yeah, that's really key. I mean, there's the Sky example that you use. I mean, the new little streaming box, it's literally like that thick, and you can whack it behind a TV. And yeah, you just couldn't do that years ago. So that's been definitely a big driver. And it was that gave me my kind of eureka moment when my mother-in-law came round, and we wouldn't have been able to do it were it not for that change in technology, because skyboxes used to be this big.
So, when you think about today, a simple home, what does a simple home actually feel like to live in? One that you may or may not have a control system because you have to control certain things, but instead of focusing on the product and the technology, the clients are coming to you saying, I want a smart, simple home. What does that actually feel like to you?
I think it's just like when you ask people, what do you want to do in your home? People just want to control the lights, control the blinds, put some music on, see who's arrived at the gate, adjust the heating every now and again. You can do all those things with our systems. You can do all those things really easily, and it looks beautiful on the wall, and it doesn't break.
Well, expand on that a little bit more. Like, so if I'm not investing money in a control system, or I don't have to spend the money that I used to spend in a control system, where can I put some of that budget in my home to get things that might give me more utility in other areas? You mentioned sound or shades. Where else can I spend that money instead of a control system?
Shades are, I'd say, the thing that probably bring our clients the most joy. That and a great sound system if they're into music. And the other, everyone's different. We've got a client I can think of that spent £250,000 on blinds for their house, or shades, as you call them in the States. And then in the kitchen, they had a little Sonos music, little Sonos Play One, at whatever it's called, at Era 100. And that was their entire sound system, because they just didn't really listen to music, but they had a big glass house with and they love their shades. It's like their favorite thing in the house, and it is amazing when you've got this huge expanse of glass. It's sort of pretty much 180 degrees around the whole house, and all the shades come down silently and in unison. It's a really cool thing. But then we've got other clients who are at the other end of the scale, and they've got like credible sound systems and no shades. But everyone's different, and that's being able to bring them into our showroom and show them all these things. You can really quickly get a feel for what they're into and what's going to float their boat. And that's kind of the fun of the job, is like finding out what people are into and helping them to spend their money on the stuff that makes the most sense. It's going to give them the most value for money. To me, there is very little value for money in an all-in-one remote control. It's not going to make your life that much better. I mean, yes, you can control the heating from it, but does that matter? Like,
When you have that conversation with a client who I assume has either gone to somebody else's showroom or will be going to somebody else's showroom, does that resonate with them, or do they still think, oh no, a control system, I gotta, they've got a brand in mind, or they want it all in one place? Or is your approach creating thought-provoking conversation and the client's leaving with a type of mindset?
yeah, and look, I know we've lost deals for this for this kind of way of working, but I know we've won a lot more. You do get people who are sort of dead set on, they love the idea of the smart home and all this sort of thing. But overall, it's been a net positive for us, and I know we've won a lot of business from it, because I think people are just refreshed by it. I think they're, they go and they get so you've got to have video distribution, and you've got to have these, expensive remote controls in every room, and you've got to have everything all controlled by one central system, and I think they're kind of thinking in the back of their mind, do I? And then when someone who's in the industry, and I'm experienced, I've been doing this a long time, and I have sold a lot of control systems. It's like it's not like I've never done it. It's like I do know the strengths and the weaknesses of this approach, and they're just really refreshed by it, and they're like, yeah, I like you. You're straightforward, and it immediately wins trust.
And you mentioned that interior designers tend to like that approach as well. I would think that other key trades would like it as well because it's less complexity, less less after the fact. A builder wants to build a home and get out of there. They don't want to keep coming back for warranty calls and the like. So I assume it's a popular approach with not only interior designers but other trades as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because it's just simpler, you know. And I think we all want a bit of extra simplicity in our lives, don't we?
You're probably on the edge of this sort of conversation that people are having. How do you think that's affected your company's reputation in the United Kingdom? Are you sort of seen as the black sheep that doesn't know what he's doing and that guy, or are people saying, hey, this is an approach that we should pay more attention to?
I mean, there are always detractors, but overall, I think people are like, yeah, that makes sense. I can see this is the direction of travel, and I do think that we are sort of at the beginning of a movement. Yeah, I do. I think this is the way things are going. Now, look, there will always be a place for very high-end fancy control system, on super yachts and things like that. There's a need for that kind of system. But I mean, I know some guys that do super yachts and are doing very sort of separated out systems in the same manner. So I don't know. There is a place for this, for full control of everything. But for most of our clients, what we do just makes sense.
You obviously are in the UK but you're familiar with the United States market. Do you see a difference in the different geographies when it comes to this approach, or are you seeing your peers in the United States and other places pursue a similar approach?
I think, no, I'd say the UK is probably a little bit ahead on this. I know other guys I'm speaking to, 'cause I'm quite friendly with a lot of people in our industry, and I'd say that there's probably more of an acceptance of my way of thinking in the UK than in the US, probably.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, crikey! I think we are quite forward thinking here in the UK, but I think we're more into design here. I think that's. I would say that we have a keener eye for what looks good. Personally, this is what I'm. I think we're. Man, can I say that we're more stylish? Is that?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can say that.
I can say
it'll
it.
have yeah.
I'm going to get a lot of flack for it,
Yeah,
but I can say it.
it'll crush our audience numbers in the United States. But hey, we're always looking to gain a new audience no matter where we can.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we are a bit more design led here, I would say. Obviously, on the coasts in the States, it's different, but as a country, I think that we're a bit more forward thinking in that way, and we, we've been using things like Dali and solid brass keypads here for a lot longer than you guys have, quite honestly. Yeah, so I think there's less reticence to move in this direction here.
James, you talk about different aesthetics, the design forward approach. Control systems can still look good, can't they?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is the keypad on the wall. You're used, what are you touching every day? And I'm not a fan of touch screens. That's it. I don't think you can make a touch screen look good. It's still just like a black oblong on the wall. I mean, sure, we don't, even when we were doing a lot of control systems, we didn't put those in every single room. We probably put one in the entrance hall, one in the kitchen, one on the first floor landing, maybe the master bedroom suite, something like that. Really, places that you needed intercom was the big driver for touchscreens. And we still do put some touchscreens in a house, but for intercom primarily. So, yeah, look, as I say, we still do control systems. I'm not saying that control systems are bad, but they're not like it's not just like a gimme that we're going to install it in your house and you come to us for a technology system.
If you fast forwarded 5 years from now, what does this market look like then? Are control system companies still around? Do they exist? Have their products gotten better, different? How do you see this evolving over the next 5 years? So for somebody who's looking at building an estate today, that they should think about the technology evolution.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum because it really is. I'll be fascinated to watch it happen. I don't know where it's going to go. I got my obviously I'm making it clear what I think now, but I I would imagine that for the sort of mid market, well, when I say mid market, everything we do is high end. You know, that I think your kind of uber wealthy multi billionaires may well still favour, you know, a complete custom control system, but I think our market is, as I say, yeah, people in, you know, fairly simple £10 million houses, you know. So
Yeah, the cheap shacks that are out there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. As I say, you know, we still do have some. You know, we look after a 130-acre estate with multiple buildings, and he's very pleased with this kind of approach because it just works for him. It does all the things he needs it to do.
I assume if you're getting into, and you mentioned super yachts, you get into multiple building structures where you need control from other locations. A control system is going to be really the only approach to something like that, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, another thing, and another key thing where you know a control system can be really good. You've got multiple homes, and you want them all to operate the same wherever they are in the world. But even then, you know, you've still got differences between TV systems and that kind of stuff. You know, so as I say, there are definitely reasons to have control systems. I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that they don't fit in some places, but I'm just saying for our business where our focus is, which is very design led homes with interior designers, people that appreciate lighting. Um, for us, it's the path that makes the most sense.
Let's talk about cameras for a minute. So I remember this is many years ago, probably 20 years ago. I walked into a home that had I can't remember if it was an AMX or a Crestron system, and they had a CCTV system, and I could see those cameras on that. This is pre iPad days. And I was blown away by how cool that was. But I remember the client saying, oh, yeah, it's great for a live view, but I can't really go back and easily get recorded footage. That becomes really problematic. And in today's world, you've got Ring and Nest and pick your $50 Home Depot camera system that you can go and buy. When it comes to cameras in these control systems or these app-based systems, what are you seeing clients opt for?
I mean, if we're making the recommendations these days, we're using Ubiquity. It's brilliant. For me, it's all about the app is the most important thing. The camera itself, the actual quality of the image from the camera, they're all pretty good these days. Some are, you know, might be marginally better than others. But really, it comes down to the app. The thing, so if the client wants to go and find out what happened yesterday or what time the dog got out or whatever it was, they don't want to have to call us up and ask us to go looking through the footage. They want to just be able to find the piece of footage that they want, clip it, and send it to the police or to their neighbour or, you know, whatever it is they're trying to do. You cannot do that stuff in a control system. All you can do is look at live view. Now there are some exceptions. I think a LAN you can do some pretty cool stuff with, but you know, for most of the big ones, Crestron Control 4, Savant, you can just look at the live view.
And you mentioned Ubiquity is the product you're using. That's a good example of, I'm guessing that their app, which I can't say I'm familiar with, but I'm guessing it's pretty intuitive, pretty easy to use, pretty easy to find that video of the dog getting out, so much so that the user is using that instead of whatever control system that they might have previously tied on top of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you showed any normal human being, like, do you want to use this user interface or this user interface? Every single one of them would pick the Unify Camera app. It is just extraordinarily good.
What you're hitting on is the user experience, is that the user
Yeah, that's what
experience
this
is
is
just better.
all. Ultimately, that's what this whole conversation is about: is the user experience. Yeah.
So how do you get users to experience that without actually living with a system? Because I could see a lot of people making the mistake, or it's not a mistake, but they could be saying, let's make this investment in a control technology system, or excuse me, a centralized technology system. And then when they actually go to use it, it doesn't meet their expectations and the usability isn't great. How do you avoid that from happening in the pre-construction process?
Well, I mean, we're lucky to have a fantastic showroom that's got all of this stuff installed in the context of a beautiful living space. So, our showroom was one of the first to be done out like a beautiful high-end apartment, and so people can actually see all this technology in the context of that kind of space, and actually push some buttons and try it out. And we've got a control system in there. We've got a Control 4 system. As I say, we were the UK's first certified showroom for Control 4. But when you show people, well, do you want to use this app or this app? Everyone picks, do you want to, I mean, so it's silly little things like, and I've spoken to Control 4 about this many, many times. If you want to use Spotify with their system, it's a two-step thing. You queue up the music you want in the Spotify app, and then you go to the Control 4 app and you use that to control the volume and group your zones. And that's just not great. I know, I've lived with it in my house. Up until fairly recently, I had a Control 4 system in my house, and I dealt with that pain. It's a relative, wasn't that painful. And just being able to use AirPlay too. 99% of our clients use iPhones, and just being able to send music from the Spotify app without having to go into another app and group the zones that I want to, it's just much easier. Now, Control 4 would say, well, really, you should be using Tidal if you're going to use our control, ours. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't want to use Tidal. I did use Tidal for a bit because I had a Control 4 system, and I didn't like it as much. I like my friends send me playlists in Spotify. Spotify is just like it's the music streaming app, and I don't want to have to be told what to use just because my technology in the house works that way.
Yeah, that goes back to your earlier point of I don't want to be put in a box just to make my system work well when there are other applications that I'm more familiar with, more in tune with, that can work better than if I make that sacrifice. And so it sounds like you're actively walking clients through that A/B user experience of do you like this or do you like this? How about this for music versus this for music? Are you seeing a lot of people do that, or are they still leading with the control system approach and only kind of defaulting back to an app based approach if it doesn't make sense for people?
There's certainly, I know lots of our competitors are, leading with the control system approach. And look, they've got great businesses and they're doing well at it. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that's just not how I want to run my business and look after my clients. Yeah. Like you said it 1,000 times. There are many different ways to run a successful business in this industry. There's no rights and wrongs.
And I will say I am seeing more and more people take the approach that you're taking, particularly when it comes to the estate level projects. People have been burnt by a system, and you've mentioned Control 4 and Lutron only because that's what you're mentioning by name. Pick a
That's just what I've done. Yeah.
right. Pick a centralized system. We had clients walk into our office all the time and say, I hate this Crestron system, Savant system, Control 4, Lutron. They're all good systems. They're all great
Yeah.
companies that make great products. So they can't all be bad. But the system didn't meet the user experience that the client wanted to have in their home. And therefore, the perception was that the product was bad, not that the sales process or the needs evaluation process, it just didn't work up front, or they sold the product as opposed to the experience. And I'm seeing more and more people make that change, particularly, like I said, in the estate category, where people have been burnt by a poorly designed centralized control system, not poorly installed, not poorly functioning, but poorly designed to the way they wanted to live in the home in 2025 as we sit here today.
Yeah, yeah. And to say, and it does, what you're saying absolutely rings true. I mean, we're talking to a client with a 55,000 square foot well, it's more than a house really. And they're the reason they're talking to us is because of this approach, because they don't want all the complexity they just want to put some music on and have beautiful lighting. It's like, is that too much to ask?
If I want that approach, James, is that approach cheaper for me, or is my overall outlay going to end up being about the same?
I mean, overall, the size of our projects are going up because people are spending money on stuff they want to spend money on. They're pleased to give you money for great sound and beautiful shades and lights and all the rest of it. I think they always felt a little bit sort of, oh, I have to buy that £40,000 video switch that's going to sit in a rack that do you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
it was never a fun purchase. It was like people they were sort of just told they needed it to make the house work. So we're actually seeing the value of our projects go up because we're selling more fun stuff.
So you're selling more fun stuff. Your revenue hasn't changed. The client is getting more utility, so they're much happier. They're raving fans of you and your company, and you even cited that in terms of the ticketing volume being down and everything like that. That sounds like a win-win approach. So what are we missing?
I honestly don't know. I think that there's a lot of businesses making lots of money selling control systems, and look, if they're doing it well and they've got happy clients, and I haven't got a problem with that. I'm not saying they're wrong. There's, as I say, there's lots of guys doing a super great job, particularly within Synergy, and I don't. I'm not saying that I've got a problem with them. I'm just saying this is the way we're doing it, and it's working for us and our clients. And I much prefer. I can look people in the eye and say, "Yeah, you should definitely buy this. It's going to make your life better." I can. I just feel it's a more genuine sort of sales pitch, basically.
It sounds like you truly believe in the approach. This isn't a marketing pitch. This isn't a I'm trying to be disruptive. This is I truly believe this is the right way for users to consume technology in the 21st century.
Yeah, I do. Honestly, I was a little bit reticent to do this podcast because I know, I've got some suppliers that will be a little bit peeved at me. But is what I believe, and it is the way that we're advising our clients and how I'm living this life myself. I mean, I'm in my own house, even with a Steinway music system, with a TV. And I just operate it through two remote controls. I've got a Sky remote control, and then I've also got an Apple TV remote control. And it just works, even though there's some complexity there. There's a surround sound processor and a TV, and you would think, well, surely you need a control system for that. And you actually don't. It all works great through CEC. I just pick up the remote. If I want to watch Sky, I pick up the Sky remote. If I want to use the Apple TV, I pick up the Apple TV remote, and it knows what inputs on what and switches it over automatically. So I'm living this. I'm living my own recommendations.
And you mentioned voice earlier. In the early days of control system or the unified remote control, voice didn't exist. And so now if I want to use the voice functionality in my Sky or Comcast or Apple TV, I really can't do that through a control system that might only have a universal remote control with buttons and labels and the like. And so much of the user experience has become voice driven in today's day and age that I'm probably in some instances creating a worse experience because I can't use the native voice application that many of these that these services have been designed around.
100%. I mean, the Control 4 remote, you could actually use the Apple TV voice command. It was flaky. In my experience, it was anyway. I kept having to reconnect it and stuff like that. But the Sky remote is amazing. I can just talk into it and it puts on what I want, and it's free as well. Like the remote is virtually free. And if you drop it on a stone floor, you haven't just smoked £1,000.
Watching TV is a very emotional experience, and nobody wants a flaky TV watching experience. When you've come home from a long day or you finally have some time to yourself to flip on the game or watch whatever show you might be interested in, a flaky experience is just not okay. It's got to be seamless for a client.
Yeah. And look, you can make control systems solid. Done properly, a really good control system can be brilliant. But it's the native remote control that you can just talk into is also great as well. So as I say, there are no rights and wrongs here, and I'm not saying that this is the way to do it, but it's certainly worth considering. That's for sure.
Well, I would say you've caveated yourself enough to I don't think you're going to get a lot of calls from your suppliers that you've offended here. We invited you on here today because we wanted a thought-provoking conversation around the current state of technology systems, or excuse me, this current state of control systems, a little bit of a different market perspective, and quite frankly, somebody who's leading the thought process around changing the user experience or focusing on that user experience as opposed to focusing on the products that they may sell. So, James, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you for being here on The Intelligent Estate.
No, thanks, Charlie. This has been good fun.